whether it is eggs or milk or sweet potatoes. We are visited with these intermittent shortages of vital foods. And as I said before, and I say again, you can have all the hotels, the 6 of them, being constructed simultaneously. If your agriculture is suffering, we all suffer. And the builders of those hotels will abandon those hotels, and moreover will abandon this country and return from whence they came, and we will be left here with concrete and no soil. That is the state, Your Honor, of this economy. I think it was Mark Twain. Some people attribute the quote to Disraeli. Their lies, damn lies, and statistics. And quite often that sums up a government's treatment of its economic reviews. That you can reduce, as a good technocrat, everything to statistics. And that those statistics will sound very, very good. And you will add to the statistics the language of bounty. And the people out there, they're not feeling this bounty. They're not experiencing this bounty. They're unhappy. They're unhappy. And they're unhappy sometimes because they're hungry. I'm sorry to say that. And when you have a population that is unhappy and hungry, the pressure is placed on a government to do 2 things: to tell the truth and to work on those truths, those harsh truths. And this government has failed in both regards. The government is failing to confront truth. And as demonstrated in this report yesterday, the government may be failing in terms of telling the truth to the people of this country. I've said that is not personal. That is an objective assessment. That is valid and legitimate political commentary in response to what we heard yesterday. So when a government boasts about improved ratings, that we are moving up, we are still at junk status. Have the people been told that? When you tell the people that the ratings agencies are elevating us, must you not also tell the people of Barbados that the rating agencies have failed to tell us that we have not moved beyond junk status? I heard the minister yesterday, the honorable member for Christchurch East Central, read a table of debt servicing. I have a commitment to the truth, and as a party, we will have to examine that. I am the leader, but I am not a despot. And we like to subject things to what we call teamwork. And if any of you were to have my experience, you would find yourselves introduced to something, a foreign concept, a concept that is foreign to you. It's called teamwork, where you assemble your good intellects and you do what is called brainstorm, and you come up with the answers to your questions. And what the people of this country need to be told is that this government has not been altogether candid on the question of interest rates. On the question of interest rates, which become a part of government's obligation to its lenders, has this government been candid? In other words, has this government offered full disclosure as to possibly the perilous state of its debt obligations? Are we living on borrowed time? Or are we borrowing some time from our hapless children and grandchildren? And if not borrowing time, are we taking time from them? And if not taking time from them, are we taking prosperity from them? No wonder you will find that most of our young people, and I've said before and I say it again, one of the tragedies of modern life in Barbados is that we have lost so many of our bright young people. And we used to lose our bright young people on the basis of temporary sojourns in the metropolitan domains. But this group is telling you that they're not coming back here, perhaps on holiday, and tragically to a funeral. But we are raising a generation in this country that is not feeling that commitment to this society. And that is a tragedy. And we as members of this generation, this present political generation of all colors, must join and take joint responsibility. We must take joint responsibility. But I wonder if this government is taking its portion of that joint responsibility. But the lawyers will tell you that if it is joint, it is also not severable. But I ask this government, as in relation to crime, take responsibility for the tragedy of young life in Barbados. I come to the issue of debt restructuring. And I said earlier that I promised the minister that I would make available to him. I'm not going to make this a document of the House. I don't have the details, but this is just for his edification. The article is called Debt Swaps. Are we robbing Peter to pay Paul? It is by Dr. Juliet Melville.
You're quoting from an honorable member?
No, I'm not. I'm just calling the name so that
you know the procedure.
I'm not going to quote. Not going to quote. Not going to quote, sir. The honorable member will locate it. And she is a former director of the economics department at the Caribbean Development Bank and a former lecturer at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. And I hope that her CV is impressive. But I commend to the honorable member for Christchurch East Central some contact with that article by Dr. Juliet Melville. I believe she exists. And she wrote on the perilous state of NIS. Not going to quote her, sir.
I hope you don't.
Quote her. Not going to quote her.
Honorable, if you want to quote, you can quote and just make it a document of yours.
But I don't have the date. I don't have the.
But there's no peril in quoting, Honorable, unless if you have the important information, the requisite information, you can quote as long as you make it a document of the House.
I am guided by the chair, sir. And so I will make this article a document of the House. Debt Swaps, Are We Robbing Peter to Pay Paul by Dr. Juliet Melville. And I will just excise.
It's an article from a newspaper, I remember.
But that is why I did not wish to.
So you ought not to then, if that's the case.
Yes, I will leave that.
Yes.
And this will become a private professional transaction between the honorable member and myself, and he will go and read it. He knows where to find it. You find it on the internet probably. And she has said some very interesting things about the state of our debt. And she has said even more interesting things about these debt swaps that we came in here and boasted about a few months ago above my head. So I had to go away and consult the experts. And I'm not going to offend the procedure of this house.
I would not allow you, sir.
Indeed not, sir. But from my own, I will say to you what I extrapolate from that document, that the South Coast Water Reclamation Facility, that document is there. You have my honest approach to this. I made some notes. That the government claims it is saving money, and this is on the South Coast Water Reclamation Facility matter in the amount of $140 million, which the government said at the time would be government's largest project, sewage. Government is very proud of that. And she says that the government claims it is saving money, but in reality,
You tell me you extrapolating, you know.
I'm extrapolating.
So if you have to extrapolate, means you got to use your own words.
Yes, my own words.
No, you can't say what she said. You are extrapolating.
Let me extrapolate then.
Do that.
Thank you, sir.
But we're not
You're very
quoting
kind.
her. We're not quoting her. You extrapolated, sir.
Let me
interpreting.
extrapolate.
Armor means you're interpreting. You can interpret, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, you can interpret.
Yes, let me interpret and extrapolate, or extrapolate and then interpret.
Yes.
Yes.
Without using her words, though.
Without using her words. That the NIS is really leaking funds in this debt swap arrangement. That it has not been as advantageous to the people of Barbados as was sold in this chamber. That somebody is losing. Somebody is sacrificing. And it seems that in this country, the sacrificial lamb must always be the NIS. The Poor People's Bank. The Poor People's Bank. Raided by White Oak to the extent of $1.3 billion. And now this debt swap arrangement is raiding the NIS to the extent of $400 million. $1.7 billion. All told, that the NIS has had to sacrifice the financial arrangements. Is that why the people of this country in the public service are being forced to retire at 67? Is that why, Your Honor? I call it the poor man's bank. Why, even at the level of a security fund, must the poor man make the sacrifice? You ever saw any rich person in at the NIS, sir? Asking for help? No. So in addition to the Barbados government now making itself Barbados's most famous bank robber, they're heading back to the NIS to rob the NIS. And to result in the poor people of this country, civil servants. A man goes into the public service at the age of 18. And 49 years later, he can retire. 49 years later, Your Honor, that's not fair. That's not civilized. That is not a socialist country. That is not a socialist country or a country that models itself on the socialism of Scandinavia. And this is an exchange that the honorable member for St. Michael South and I had recently in here. But perhaps we don't have the resources of those Scandinavian countries. But the point is, our NIS is being made the sacrificial lamb in too many of government's shrouded, I'm going to use neutral language, shrouded financial arrangements. And so White Oak came down here and told this government, look, reduce NIS's indebtedness, or the government's indebtedness, by $1.3 billion. And in this debt swap, again, they hit the NIS. That's not fair, sir. That is not fair. So, Your Honor, it is my position, it is our party's position that we are borrowing too much money. Government is claiming that the economy has stabilized. If the economy has stabilized, why are we going back for these loans all the time? If it has stabilized, why are we back on the people's doorstep like Sharkey? Some of them are here too young to know Sharkey. The honorable member for St. Thomas is well familiar with Sharkey. We are back on the people's doorstep looking to borrow again and again and again. Every trip out of this country, the only report card we bringing back is that we borrowed more money. And if the economy has stabilized, why must we go back? If it has stabilized, you use the existing foreign exchange that you borrowed to generate itself within the economy. In other words, do what you say the loan was designed for. But you don't come and put it like a warm egg in a nest and just look at it and say you have an egg. Let it hatch. And let it grow into a chicken. Pardon the metaphor. But there's no report from this government that we're doing that. There's no report from this government that these loans are going into productive sectors. That's the point, honorable member, through you, sir. And so we heard yesterday, and we've been hearing for the last few weeks, that this economy has stabilized, and we heard yesterday the more emotive and exciting language that there is bunky. I think one of the newspapers may have carried it as a headline today. I hope they carried it tongue-in-cheek and with sarcasm, as opposed to joining the government in this exaggerated language. There's no bounty around here. None. If there were bounty around here, this budget would not now be characterized by its appeal to pedicures and cornflakes. So I've never heard the likes of this. I've never heard the likes of this. People have come to budget day and budget speeches prepared for academic interventions and for structural attention to the economy, not corn curls and pedicures, and telling people, boasting to people, and people thumping the desk that you've given them $1.36 more. $1.36 more? What does decency do in the face of insult? Du Bois asked. That's an insult to the intelligence of Barbadians. But Barbadians will remain decent all the same. And Barbadians will remain patient all the same. This government is now characterized by its overspending. And I will come very shortly to the areas of that overspending at the risk that I will make Barbadians angry. But I'm not here to make Barbadians angry, I'm here to tell the truth. And if Barbadians now find that the truth makes them angry, I am prepared to join them and become angry as well. Let me move quickly to education. In the estimates that precede these debates, education is always the area that receives highest allocation, and that's because that is consistent with what I said earlier, that the most successful and the most significant revolution in this country, not a shot was fired. A shot was fired at injustice, and injustice lost. Because the poor people's children in this country got a chance that generations of poor people never before had. Does this government understand the significance of that revolution? Does this government understand that you do not tamper with the results of that revolution unless you do so carefully, and carefully means in consultation with the people? Does this government understand that? Does this government understand that, as I have told the honorable member for St. James South before, who probably even now is not comprehending, that her constituency and a significant part of her constituency is evidence of the success of education? And I'm prepared to educate her as to what I mean. That in 1970, it was a place where the Scout Jamboree was held, 70, 71, around there, Dunks Trees, and before that, Canes. Look at it now. Those are the results of the education revolution in this country. And I hope the honorable member knows that, and I won't tell her again because she may now translate it into electoral results. But those will be futile. Because unless you understand that, you will not meet success there. And that is what education did in this country. I want to tell a story about education. I'm on the subject of education. I wish I could call his name. A few weeks ago, I had a telephone call from a gentleman. I'll just say he lives in St. Peter. And in 1961, September 1961, I believe his father went and paid $8.50 at Corridge Parish School. This is something that Barbadians need to hear. This is something that young Barbadians need to hear. These are stories that young Barbadians need to hear, so that when they interpret their struggle, they must understand that their parents and grandparents had a more intense struggle than they do now. And if they understand that, they would be less likely to incline themselves to deviance. Because the life of people, the majority of people in this country, is largely a life of struggle. And 1961 alleviated that struggle, fundamentally and in a revolutionary way. And that gentleman telephoned me and told me in September 1961, his father went and paid the $8.50 to Corridge Parish. And as life goes, his father emigrated to England and communicated with his mother and his aunt. Hate to be bringing the gentleman's business into public domains, but I believe that he would support this testimony on his behalf, and not only on his behalf, but on behalf of a generation. That's why people in this country feel so warmly towards Mr. Errol Walton Barrow. A natural warmth. And his father went away and informed his mother, look, I've started a new life, and I cannot any longer support the young man. And he told me his mother said some words he would never forget. She said, if I have to suck salt, you're staying in school. And the school was, they used to call it the Parry, Corridge Parry. She said, if I have to suck salt, you staying in there. Except that she had no idea where the $8.50 was going to come from. If you, the economists can convert the value of $8.50 into modern currency, and it will come to more than $1,000. Believe it or not, young people. And in September, I beg your pardon, after the term started, His Excellency Errol Walton Barrow, after a conversation with Sir James Cameron Tudor, at the time James Cameron Tudor, Education Minister, enacted that education, secondary education, would no longer be a privilege, but it became a right. And that the poor people's children in this country no longer had to pay $8.50, which converted to modern currency is a large amount of money. And he walked in, and they used to call it the governing body. He walked into the governing body the following January and received that $8.50 back. And that was his moment in liberation. He became a principal of a school in this country. And that is why people feel so warmly towards that patriarch. And it is not my peculiar political expedition that will go on trial here, but it is an objective statement in the revolution called education that happened in this country in 1961. And all Barbadians, including the members of this parliament who don't understand it, must be brought to a stage in which they understand it. And when this government threatens to dismantle a system that this government does not understand, then this government must stand condemned for betraying the interests of people in this country. They don't understand it, and I'm not saying they. This government does not understand it. This government does not understand the institution that it is threatening to dismantle, and they can't touch it unless its beneficiaries and the children and grandchildren of its beneficiaries have an input. And this government's sin has been the sin of a lack of consultation with the people of this country as to that thing we call 11+. It is sacred, but it is not perfect. That it is sacred does not mean that it is perfect. And in its imperfection, the government has an obligation and a responsibility to openly communicate with its beneficiaries and its potential beneficiaries as to its usefulness. There are problems. There are problems in the primary schools. A child fails an 11+ exam. He doesn't fail that exam on that morning. He has been failing from the time he was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. His failure has been daily, weekly, and yearly. I repeat, it is sacred, and it was sacred, but it is not perfect. And it must not be a subject for callous dismantling unless the people who are invested in that scheme, in that system, are given fair opportunity to say how they feel about it. And that has been this government's failure. That this government has not consulted with the people of this country. And most of all, I remember one day hearing that the government invited the teachers under Tengat Kefil to consult on something that the government had already decided. No wonder the teachers rejected it. I am on education.
Honorable member.
Beg your pardon, sir.
Is this appropriate time as it relates to a break? Honorable member.
Indeed, Your Honor. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 8:15 p.m.
Questions that this honorable chamber be suspended until 8:15 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 8:15 p.m.